In the heart of Africa, a land of 1,000 hills, a darkness descended in the spring of 1994. In just 100 days, the world witnessed an unimaginable horror as neighbor turned against neighbor, friend against friend. This is the story of the Rwandan Genocide, a period when the very fabric of humanity seemed to tear apart, but it is also a story of survival, of resilience, and of a nation's struggle to heal from the deepest of wounds. Today, we're not just looking back at history, we're trying to understand the incomprehensible. How did this happen? And what lessons must we never forget? The roots of this tragedy run deep, entwined with a colonial past that weaponized identity. Before European powers arrived, the terms Hutu and Tutsi were more about social and economic status than rigid ethnic divides. You could move between these groups, but the Belgian colonial administration changed everything. They introduced identity cards, solidifying these fluid categories into immutable ethnic labels. They favored the Tutsi minority, placing them in positions of power and education, while marginalizing the Hutu majority. This wasn't just administrative, it was a deliberate strategy of divide and rule that planted the seeds of resentment and hatred that would fester for decades. When Rwanda gained independence in 1962, the power dynamics flipped. The Hutu majority took control, and years of suppressed anger erupted into waves of violence against the Tutsi, forcing hundreds of thousands to flee to neighboring countries. This history of division, of imposed identities and political manipulation created a powder keg. All it needed was a spark. That spark came on the evening of April 6, 1994. The plane carrying Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana, a Hutu, was shot down as it approached Kigali. The culprits have never been definitively identified, but for the Hutu extremists who had been preparing for this moment, it was the signal they had been waiting for. Within hours, the carefully orchestrated plan for genocide was set in motion. Roadblocks, manned by the army and a brutal Hutu militia known as the Interahamwe, sprung up across the capital. Presidential guards began executing opposition politicians and prominent Tutsi figures. The killing had begun. What unfolded next was a descent into a hell on earth, a period that would become known as the 100 Days. This was not a distant war fought by armies on a battlefield. This was intimate, personal, and brutally low-tech. The primary weapons were not guns, but machetes, clubs, and farming tools. The government and extremist leaders used radio, particularly the station RTLM, as a weapon of mass destruction. Day and night, it broadcast a relentless stream of hate propaganda, dehumanizing the Tutsi, calling them cockroaches that needed to be exterminated. The radio hosts would read out names and license plates, directing the killers to their next victims. It was a chilling demonstration of how media can be twisted to fuel genocide, turning words into warrants for death. Ordinary people, farmers, teachers, even doctors, were incited to become killers. Neighbors who had shared meals and celebrated holidays together were now hunting each other down. Churches and schools, traditionally places of sanctuary, became slaughterhouses. Thousands fled to these locations, believing they would be safe, only to be trapped and systematically murdered. The sheer speed and scale of the killing were staggering. In 100 days, an estimated 800,000 to 1 million people were murdered. This is a rate of killing nearly 3 times faster than that of the Holocaust. It was a frenzy of violence that consumed the nation, leaving no family untouched. And where was the world? The international community knew what was happening. UN peacekeepers, under the command of General Romeo Dallaire, were on the ground. Dallaire repeatedly warned his superiors at the UN headquarters in New York about the impending catastrophe. He pleaded for a stronger mandate and more troops to intervene, to protect civilians. But his warnings were ignored. Instead of reinforcing the mission, the world powers decided to withdraw. The UN Security Council, paralyzed by political indifference, and a lack of will to get involved in what was deemed a civil war, voted to drastically reduce the peacekeeping force, leaving only a skeleton crew behind. They effectively abandoned Rwanda to its fate. It was a catastrophic moral failure, a moment when the promise of never again, made after the Holocaust, rang hollow. The world stayed silent, and in that silence, hundreds of thousands perished. But even in the deepest darkness, sparks of incredible courage and humanity flicker. There are countless stories of Hutus who risked their own lives to hide their Tutsi neighbors. People like Paul Rusesabagina, the manager of the Hotel des Mille Collines, who sheltered over 1,000 people from the killers outside. There are stories of incredible bravery, like that of Captain Mbaye Diagne, a Senegalese UN peacekeeper, who on his own initiative defied orders and saved hundreds of lives by driving them through roadblocks to safety before he himself was killed. And most importantly, there are the stories of the survivors, people who witnessed the unthinkable, who lost everyone they loved, yet somehow found the strength to live. They hid in swamps for weeks, pretended to be dead amongst piles of bodies, and endured horrors that words cannot fully capture. Their testimonies are a vital, painful reminder of what happened, ensuring that the victims are not just statistics, but remembered as individuals, mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters whose lives were stolen. The genocide was finally brought to an end in July 1994, not by international intervention, but when the Rwandan Patriotic Front, or RPF, a rebel army of exiled Tutsis led by Paul Kagame, fought its way across the country and captured the capital, Kigali. The extremist government collapsed, and its leaders, along with millions of Hutu civilians who feared reprisal, fled to neighboring countries, creating a massive refugee crisis. The 100 days of killing were over, but the country was in ruins. The land was littered with bodies, the infrastructure was destroyed, and the society was shattered by trauma and mistrust. How does a nation even begin to heal from such a wound? The path to reconciliation has been one of the most difficult and complex challenges of the modern era. In the immediate aftermath, Rwanda faced the monumental task of bringing over 100,000 perpetrators to justice. The formal court system was overwhelmed. To address this, Rwanda turned to a traditional justice system called Gacaca courts. These were community-run tribunals where villagers would gather to hear confessions and testimonies. It was a controversial process, but it allowed for a measure of truth-telling and justice at a local level, forcing communities to confront what had happened in their midst. Today, Rwanda has transformed itself in remarkable ways. It is one of the safest, cleanest, and most economically dynamic countries in Africa. The government has officially abolished the ethnic labels of Hutu and Tutsi. Everyone is now simply Rwandan. This state-led push for national unity is visible everywhere, but beneath this surface of progress, the scars remain. Reconciliation is not a finished project, it's an ongoing, daily process. It happens in the quiet moments between neighbors who have a shared, horrific past. It exists in the hearts of a new generation born after the genocide, who are taught about their country's history in the hopes that they will build a different future. The Rwandan Genocide serves as a permanent, harrowing warning to the world. It shows us how quickly societies can unravel, how easily propaganda can turn ordinary people into monsters, and the devastating cost of international indifference. It forces us to ask ourselves difficult questions. What is our responsibility when we see injustice? When do we speak up? When do we act? The lessons of Rwanda are not just about the past. They are about our present and our future. In a world still plagued by division, hate speech, and conflict, the story of Rwanda is a solemn reminder that the words "never again" are not a promise, but a challenge we must all strive to meet every single day. Thank you for joining us to remember and reflect on this critical moment in human history. It's through understanding these dark chapters that we can hope to build a brighter, more compassionate world. If you found this video meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world.